In a world divided by pride, where voices clash and hearts drift apart, follow the journey of 12 unlikely disciples as they learn that true unity is not found in towering monuments or shared words, but in the depths of love, humility, and compassion. A wisdom that could rebuild even the ruins of Babel itself. The disciples marveled at the towering walls and golden domes as they approached the bustling city. Laughter and chatter filled the air, blending with the scent of freshly baked bread, spices, and the earthy aroma of merchants' goods piled high along the streets. The rich traders, dressed in vibrant silks, bartered over lavish fabrics and rare spices, while the impoverished farmers struggled to sell their produce, their faces lined with exhaustion and hope. This city was alive but fractured, with invisible lines that separated the wealthy from the poor, the powerful from the meek. As Jesus walked among them, his heart ached, sensing the pride that had become a wall in this city, dividing its people and tearing at the fabric of their unity. The disciples, looking around with wide eyes, felt the pulse of division in the air, though they could not yet grasp its source. Peter, always quick to speak, muttered under his breath, "These people build walls, not bridges." His eyes lingered on a young boy, dressed in rags, clutching a few bruised fruits as he tried to sell them amidst the crowds. John watched quietly, his gaze softening as he noticed a group of women, their clothes tattered, begging for scraps near the market stalls. Each disciple in their own way felt the sting of this disparity. And though they did not yet understand why Jesus had brought them here, they trusted him. Jesus turned to them, his eyes filled with compassion and sadness. "Observe, my friends," he said, his voice calm yet powerful. "Here is where pride has taken root, and where unity has begun to wither. But remember, even the hardest ground can be softened." His words hung heavy in the air, and the disciples, caught between curiosity and a growing sense of unease, followed him deeper into the heart of the city, their hearts stirring with questions they could not yet ask. As the sun began its descent, casting a golden hue over the city below, Jesus led his disciples to a quiet hillside just outside the city. The gentle hum of insects and the rustling of leaves filled the silence as they settled around him, eager for the wisdom he would share. The disciples sensed that something profound was coming, a lesson perhaps unlike any they had heard before. Jesus waited until the last light of day kissed the horizon, then spoke, his voice soft and filled with ancient sadness. Long ago, all of humanity spoke one language. He began, painting a picture of a world bound by unity and understanding. The disciples were drawn into his words, feeling the weight of this lost harmony. They were ambitious, these people, Jesus continued, his eyes distant as if recalling a memory of ages past. They believed they could build a tower to reach the heavens, a monument to their greatness. His voice grew quieter, tinged with sorrow. But their ambition turned to arrogance, and they forgot the Creator who had given them this unity. So, God scattered them, dividing their language and their hearts. The disciples were silent, each lost in thought. John, ever contemplative, felt a pang of humility, reflecting on his own pride. Peter, restless and brimming with energy, found himself questioning the strength of his faith. Mary, with a deep understanding of human frailty, wondered at the power of language and the walls it could create. Jesus' story lingered in their minds, like seeds planted in fertile soil, each disciple resonating with a different piece of the tale, feeling its truth echo in the chambers of their hearts. The next morning, as the city stirred to life, Jesus led his disciples to the workshop of Jacob, a humble carpenter known throughout the city for his kindness and quiet generosity. Jacob's workshop was modest, tucked away in a dusty corner of the city's poorer district, a stark contrast to the gleaming mansions and golden towers of the wealthy. As the disciples watched, Jesus joined Jacob in his work, lifting heavy beams and shaping rough wood into smooth, sturdy planks. Jacob was a man of few words, but his gentle spirit spoke volumes. He greeted each passerby with a warm smile, offering what little he had to those in need. To the disciples, This humble man seemed to embody a strength far greater than the powerful merchants who paraded through the city with prideful arrogance. Peter, curious and intrigued, approached Jacob. "Why do you give so much when you have so little?" he asked, his voice tinged with genuine confusion. Jacob smiled, pausing to wipe the sweat from his brow. "Because I know what it is to have nothing," he replied simply. His words struck a chord within Peter, stirring memories of his own humble beginnings as a fisherman. Jesus, sensing the disciples' wonder, spoke to them as they watched Jacob work. "True strength lies not in wealth or power, but in the willingness to serve others," he said, his voice gentle but firm. The disciples, each in their own way, began to see that unity was not built through ambition, but through love and compassion. In that small, dusty workshop, the seeds of understanding were planted, their hearts opening to a new vision of strength and purpose. Days passed, and Jacob's humble spirit continued to inspire the disciples, drawing them closer to one another. But a shadow loomed over their newfound unity. News spread that Jacob's workshop was set to be demolished, the land sold to a wealthy merchant who planned to build a grand estate. The disciples, filled with righteous anger, decided to act. Peter, driven by his fiery spirit, took charge, rallying the others to help. They pooled together their resources, gathering every coin and favor they could, determined to rebuild Jacob's workshop and save him from the grip of greed that had taken hold of the city. It was a test of their faith, a challenge that would stretch their understanding of unity and sacrifice. Each disciple struggled with their own fears and doubts. John, ever introspective, wrestled with the idea of giving all that he had, wondering if he had the strength to let go of his comforts. Mary, who had seen the worst of human nature, feared the risk of failure and the pain of disappointment. Yet, with Jesus' guidance, they found courage, their individual strengths merging into a powerful force of love and compassion. Together they rebuilt Jacob's workshop, not for recognition or reward, but as an act of faith, a testament to the unity they were learning to embrace. As they laid the final stone, each disciple felt a profound sense of purpose, realizing that their unity was not a means to an end, but the very foundation of their mission. Jesus watched, his heart full of joy, as the disciples took their first steps toward building a world united by love and humility. One morning, Jesus led the disciples to a nearby quarry, where rough stones lay scattered across the ground. The quarry was a place of hard labor, its workers sweating under the relentless sun as they chiseled massive stones to be used in the city's grand structures. Jesus picked up a small, unremarkable stone, its surface rough and weathered. He handed it to Peter, who examined it with a puzzled expression. "It's just a stone," Peter muttered, shrugging. But Jesus smiled, his eyes full of wisdom. "This stone may seem insignificant," he began, "but imagine if the strongest foundation were built with stones like this, overlooked by those who seek only what glitters." He then shared a parable of a builder who dismissed the humble stones, only to find that his grand building crumbled without their strength. The disciples pondered the parable, each interpreting it in light of their own struggles and insecurities. Peter, often impulsive, recognized his need for patience and humility. John, who sometimes struggled with pride, saw the value of embracing the strengths of others. Mary, who often felt small and inadequate, realized that her compassion was a strength, a foundation upon which others could lean. The stone became a symbol for each of them, a reminder that their journey was not about greatness but about humility, about building something eternal through love. As they left the quarry, each disciple held their own stone, feeling its weight and understanding that the true foundation of their mission was not in the towers they could build, but in the quiet strength of unity and humility. The marketplace was alive with the hum of voices, a sea of unfamiliar faces and foreign dialects that mingled and overlapped in a symphony of life. Jesus and his disciples found themselves surrounded by strangers from distant lands, traders, wanderers, and laborers, each speaking in languages the disciples could not understand. As the midday sun beat down, Jesus gestured to a shaded area beneath an ancient olive tree, inviting the group to rest. Just as they settled, a group of travelers approached, carrying baskets of food and drink, their faces worn from the journey but marked by warm smiles. The travelers, unable to communicate with words, extended their offerings, bowing their heads in a gesture of peace. The disciples were hesitant at first, struggling with their inability to speak the same language, but Jesus welcomed the travelers with open arms, encouraging the disciples to do the same. What followed was a meal like no other. Words were scarce, replaced by laughter, hand gestures, and the sharing of food passed from hand to hand. The disciples, initially awkward and uncertain, began to feel a connection beyond words, an understanding forged through shared smiles, laughter, and the simple act of breaking bread together. John marveled at the depth of this unspoken unity, while Peter, always eager, tried to mimic the travelers' gestures, provoking laughter and camaraderie. Mary, observing the moment, felt a warmth in her heart, a realization that unity was not bound by language or customs, but by kindness and openness. Jesus watched, his gaze soft and knowing, as his disciples experienced the very lesson he had been teaching them. The scattering of languages at Babel could be bridged through love and understanding. As they parted ways, the disciples felt a profound sense of connection, carrying with them the memory of a feast that transcended words, a testament to the power of unity without barriers. The next day, as they journeyed toward a small village nestled between two hills, a subtle tension began to simmer among the disciples. The path was narrow, and each disciple had their own idea about the best way forward. Peter, always brash and full of energy, insisted they take a shortcut up the rocky slope, while John argued that staying on the known path was safer. The other disciples soon joined the debate, each voicing their own opinion, until their once harmonious group was splintered by disagreement. Frustration turned to heated words, and soon an invisible wall rose among them, dividing them as surely as if it were made of stone. Jesus, observing their discord, stopped at a clearing and called them to sit. The disciples, still caught in their own frustrations, sat in tense silence, their gazes avoiding each other. Jesus, his voice calm but tinged with sadness, asked, "Why do you let pride separate you, just as it separated the builders of Babel?" The question struck them like a thunderclap. Each disciple, in their heart, felt the sting of pride, the desire to be right, to be in control, to lead rather than listen. Jesus spoke to them about humility, about the necessity of setting aside one's own desires to serve the greater good. One by one, they began to see their own pride as the true obstacle, the unseen wall that had grown between them. Slowly, the tension melted, replaced by quiet understanding and mutual apologies. As they resumed their journey, the disciples walked together, each humbled and more attuned to one another, realizing that the tower they were building within their hearts could only stand if it was built on a foundation of humility and trust. As they arrived in the village, the disciples were met with despairing faces and tear-filled eyes. The village had been struck by a severe drought, and the fields lay barren, the earth cracked and dry under the relentless sun. The people, weary and weak, greeted Jesus and his disciples with hope, whispering prayers and casting desperate glances toward the sky. Jesus, moved by their suffering, gathered the villagers and led them to the center of the village, where a dry well stood as a stark reminder of their plight. He encouraged everyone to join in prayer, a communal plea for rain to quench the parched land and revive their spirits. The disciples observed as villagers, once divided by old feuds and grievances, set aside their differences, joining hands and raising their voices in unity. Peter, watching an elderly man clasp hands with his estranged brother, felt his heart swell with understanding. John, often reserved, was moved to see children and adults alike united in hope, their voices mingling in a collective prayer. As the prayer rose to the heavens, clouds began to gather, darkening the sky. A soft rumble of thunder echoed through the valley, and soon, a gentle rain began to fall, blessing the earth and the people with its life-giving touch. The villagers wept with joy, embracing one another, and the disciples marveled at the transformation before them. Jesus turned to them, a serene smile on his face. "See how unity brings forth life?" he asked. The disciples, drenched and grateful, understood deeply that the drought had been more than physical. It had been a reminder of the emptiness left by division and the abundance that unity could bring. The disciples were soon called back to the city, where news awaited them. Jacob, the humble carpenter who had taught them so much, was facing a grave injustice. Accused of theft by a powerful merchant, Jacob's trial had turned into a spectacle, with the wealthy elite condemning him without evidence, eager to rid themselves of a man who refused to bend to their control. The disciples, appalled, felt a surge of righteous anger and a fierce determination to help. But as they moved through the city's crowded streets, they found themselves unsure of how to act in the face of such power. Peter, his heart blazing, wanted to storm into the court and confront the accusers, while John, more cautious, suggested gathering witnesses to speak in Jacob's defense. Each disciple, carrying their own sense of justice, felt the weight of the task before them. Jesus, sensing their turmoil, called them to calmness. Injustice, he told them, is a shadow that thrives on silence. To be a voice for the voiceless is to shine a light, to stand with the truth and let it speak. With renewed purpose, the disciples split up, gathering testimonies, pleading with city officials, and rallying the townspeople to stand with Jacob. Their efforts paid off, and as the trial concluded, the truth emerged, clearing Jacob's name. The disciples, exhausted but victorious, realized that they had found strength not in aggression, but in unity, each of them bringing their gifts to a common cause. Jesus' lesson was etched into their hearts. Unity was not passive, it was a force that could dismantle the walls of injustice and protect the weak. As they walked with Jacob, free at last, they felt the power of their mission solidify within them, knowing they were now part of a greater purpose, one that transcended their own lives. After days of travel and challenges, Jesus gathered his disciples one last time on a familiar hillside, the same spot where he had first told them the story of the Tower of Babel. The golden light of dawn cast a warm glow over them, and the disciples felt a quiet peace, each of them transformed by the journey. They had walked through trials, learned from strangers, faced the walls within themselves, and fought for justice together. As they sat around him, Jesus began to speak, his voice gentle but resonant, filled with the wisdom of countless generations. "You have heard the story of Babel," he began, his gaze sweeping over each disciple, his eyes filled with love. "You have seen what pride and division can do, how it scatters hearts and sows discord. But you have also seen what love and unity can accomplish. Each of you carries within you a piece of the divine language, a gift, a calling, a purpose that is not for yourself alone but for the world." His words washed over them like the morning sun, filling them with a deep understanding of the journey they had undertaken. Peter, always eager, felt a newfound humility, understanding now that true strength lay in surrender and service. John, often prideful, recognized the value of every person, each a stone in the tower of unity. Mary, once burdened by self-doubt, felt the weight lift as she understood that her compassion was a cornerstone of their mission. Jesus continued, his voice steady and soft, "The tower you are building is not one of stone, but of souls bound by love, a testament to unity that will stand against all division." He paused, letting his words sink in, his disciples' faces alight with understanding and purpose. As the sun rose higher, Jesus looked upon them with pride, knowing they were ready. "Go forth," he said, "and rebuild the world, not with ambition but with humility. Build each other up, and remember that unity is found not in the height of towers but in the depth of love." The disciples, their hearts full and spirits renewed, rose to their feet, ready to carry this message to all corners of the earth. With one last embrace, they departed, leaving the hillside as disciples no longer divided, but bound together by a purpose that would outlast them all. a legacy of love, humility, and unity that would endure across generations. This is end of the story. Comment amen if you believe in Jesus' blessings. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.